What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Roster Bubble series. Hope you guys are well. Make sure to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate all coming back. Share this out. Again, do all the good stuff. So, another episode of the Roster Bubble series. In these videos, I take a player that's on the roster bubble. I talk about their background, their competition, how they could win a spot on the roster, how they could lose a spot on the roster, and a projection at the end. And I'm going to be doing this all summer long until we get to the middle of the preseason. And then there's going to be players that are subtracted and added, and they will be have episodes done on them too. So today's candidate is Nick McCloud. Now, he's been with the Giants for the past few years. Since 2022, the Giants picked him off waivers. Then, again, this is part of the background. He started getting playing time when Adoree Jackson had that punt return injury, was out for a few weeks, and he played outside corner. Now, he did okay in the circumstances, right? He played against the Vikings. He played against the Eagles, played against a couple other teams, and did okay. Again, that's not great. He struggled mightily in that Eagles game the first time around. But again, for the circumstances, he played okay. So, you move on to the next year, similar role for him, but not as much. He did play all 17 games. He even got an interception in some more playing time. This one going up against the Washington Commanders in that game where Tommy DeVito started. So, that's obviously good for him, and he had more plays. He forced 3 fumbles, and he just got more time on special teams too. Again, there was a couple of rotations at corner. Deonte Banks was obviously there. You had Cordell Flott, you had Adoree Jackson, you had Darnay Holmes. A couple other guys mixed in, and he was one of those guys. And he was a solid special teamer, solid outside corner, can also play the slot, so he's versatile. And he enters a crowded room of cornerbacks, slot cornerbacks, and even safeties in this training camp period this summer overall, that he's going to have to get a roster spot and he's going to have to compete with those guys. Now, I will go over the stats because I'm not just giving you empty information. So in 2023, 3 starts, 17 games, 1 INT, 2 pass deflections, a forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, believe it or not. So that's pretty big for him. Playmaker, special teams, defense, whatever. 28 tackles. In coverage, 60.9% completion, which isn't bad by any stretch of imagination. You got the 1 interception, as we talked about, the 1 touchdown allowed, 72.4 passer rating compared to the year prior, which was 54.2 completion percentage, which is better, but also he had a higher passer rating and he had 3 touchdowns allowed compared to, the one in 2023. And he didn't have any interceptions or turnovers or any of that stuff, but 2 pressures in the 2 years thus far with the Giants. And even beforehand, he was with the Bills, he was with the Bengals. But he's still a young cat. He's 25 years old, went to NC State and Notre Dame. But who is he going to be competing with? Darnay Holmes is the first one off the board. He's been the Giants slot corner for the longest. Really wasn't the slot corner last year because Cordell Flott was seen as that primary slot corner, and even Adoree Jackson at times. And there was just a lot of flip-flopping. But nonetheless, you move over. This guy, if you want to consider him on the roster bubble, Trey Herndon, who they just signed from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Aaron Robinson, who's been MIA the last year and a half. He plays the slot. He plays the outside, so he is definitely competition for him. Stanley Thomas Oliver, who spent time with the Panthers over the last few years, more likely a special teamer to backup. Caleb Hayes, Alex Johnson, the UDFA out of UCLA. Cordell Flott, 3rd-round pick by the Giants in 22. David Long Jr., former Ram, Raider, Green Bay Packer, outside corner primarily, and then that's pretty much that in terms of the competition. If you want to go into safeties, Javarius Owens, Elijah Riley, Jalen Mills. That's pretty much your competition right there. So how can he win? New kick return rule, special teams. I'll start with that, right? Because obviously he made some plays. Now, if you want to go into his special team snaps, we could take a look at that real quick. But I'm going to be mentioning this a lot in these coming videos because a lot of these guys need special teams to get on the roster. He played 76% of snaps on special teams last year in the 17 games. And the thing I'm going to talk about is the new kick return rule. Whether he's probably not going to return, but making tackles, because it is more, I would say, of an advantage to the returner now than it is any of the guys on the defense. And it's not limited to kick returns. It's also punt returns and all these other different things. And even if he comes off the corner and blocks a kick, that's being a special teams asset. Again, 3 forced fumbles. Now, I don't know, where they came from. Was it on special teams? Was it on defense? But he's a playmaker of some sorts. So special teams is going to be big for him, and it has been over the last 2 seasons. Acclimates well to Bowen's system and tackles well versus the run. Now, I don't really see him getting a lot of slot time in the preseason. I think it's going to be primarily outside because you do have a mix of slot and outside guys, but I think he's better on the outside primarily. That's just my personal opinion, but if he does get slot time, he will need to tackle versus the run really well. And again, acclimating to Bowen's system. I think zone or man, he could do well in. Again, not a huge percentage of snaps, but a solid percent, and I think zone does fit him. Good coverage on the outside and position versatility. He is interchangeable, meaning Mr. Shane Bowen, with the safeties and a little bit more of the DBs too. You'll see 3 safety sets, this, that, and the third. So is Nick McCloud going to be a part of that? That's going to be very interesting to look at this spring. Now, how can you lose? Burned in Bowen's system on the outside. I see him being with the 2s, maybe the 3s. There is a team 4 technically because you got 4 quarterbacks. Presuming Daniel Jones does start training camp as the QB1 or is not injured and all that other different stuff. But if he's burned in Bowen's system on the outside, that's going to be bad for him. He's going up against some decent receivers this camp. Obviously, you'll have probably 3 receivers, whether it be Hyatt, Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, and then the 2 team. Again, I'm just making projections or just throwing it out there. You got Slayton, you got Allen Robinson, solid, polished veteran, and then you got the rest of the group. So he will need to do well against that group in order to prove himself as a solid corner to be on this roster. Only put in one spot, versatility limited. If he's on the outside, and that's they say, hey, listen, you're going to be on the outside all summer. That's just where you're going to be. He's going to need to perfect in that spot, and if he makes some mistakes, that's going to be a very slippery slope for him. Let's just say that, because again, you got more competition with corners coming in and out, and failed opportunity with the kick return rule, special teams, and possible penalties. Failed opportunity with the kick return rule and special teams. I think he's going to be able to flourish, but if he doesn't, again, that's another minus on his part. So how can he win? New kick return rule, special teams, acclimates well to Bowen's system, tackles well versus the run if asked to, less penalties, good coverage on the outside, position versatility. How can he lose? Burned in Bowen's system on the outside, only put in one spot. Failed opportunity with kick return rule, special teams, more penalties. I think he's going to make the roster, and I think he does need to make the roster. This is not for his sake, but more the Giants' sake, because you don't really have a great guy opposite of Deonte Banks. Trey Herndon's okay. He's in his 30s, a little bit more of an aged veteran. It's a quality corner, not an outstanding corner. Personally, I would have rather Kello Witherspoon, but I feel like the Giants still need depth back there. Whether they keep Darnay Holmes, that's its own decision. Aaron Robinson's probably not going to be on the roster. I could be wrong. Again, we have time to talk about that in these roster bubble vids. David Long can make a case for corner. One of these UDFAs could go off, and Cordell Flott is still going to be a part of the roster. So I just like Nick McCloud more than most. That's just my opinion. I think he is a solid contributor on special teams, but I haven't made the roster. Hit the like button, subscribe, do all the good stuff, turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate you all coming back. Stay tuned for more of these vids, and we'll talk to you next time.